Hello, everyone. Good morning. It's Sunday, the 18th of the month of Tishrei. It's 4th day of Sukkot, the 2nd day of Chol Hamoed Sukkot, and it is the 12th of October, and we are on page 40. And we are reading and learning about the world of Berea, the second world after Atzilus, and we've just finished studying that there are three, basically you can divide it into three elements. The element that is prior to the world of Atzilus is what we call nothing, because it's beyond definition, it's beyond description, there's no point getting there, we will never understand. That's the God that we believe in, that's the God that anything can happen. He can do anything, nothing affects him. He doesn't laugh, he doesn't smile, he doesn't sit, he doesn't stand, he doesn't sleep, he doesn't stay awake, and he's not up and he's not down. He's beyond definition, beyond description. That's the God, the great essence of God, no description possible. We believe in that God who is completely infinite, beyond description. The first level which forms after God is the thought process, which again is in that section of we don't know what's flying. Then comes the world of Atzilus, section 2. World of Atzilus is a world, it's divine, but the godliness within it is not. And therefore, it's sort of like, it's not a non-entity, it's not a nothing, because it's a world. Yet, what's in there is beyond description, so therefore we call it a non-entity, or it's not a non-entity, but it's like a note. It's like a mental note that you once had and it's floating around somewhere, but you can't quite grasp it, you don't know where it is. The next level, the third level, is where creation begins. That's why the second world is called the world of creation, because at this point we have an entity. It's a spiritual entity, ethereal entity as he calls it over here, but nevertheless it is an entity. That means it has a definition, has a shape to it, it has something that can be defined, can be described. Alright, so we finish with page 40 and we move to page 42. Therefore, the world of Berea is called an engraving. It's known as the world of engraving. Is anybody missing 42? No? Good. Therefore, the world of Berea is called an engraving. Engraving is the opposite of a note. Unlike an engraving, a note is an unsubstantial thing. It can be changed. If you have a thought in your mind and you haven't written it down, well, your mind, I changed my mind. Minds can be changed all the time. It's when you start putting it down on paper, or furthermore, it's not just on paper, it's engraved. If you want to get rid of that idea, you have to not just erase it, you have to gouge it out. You have to destroy it. Because once you engrave something, it could remain forever potential. A piece of paper, well, it can be. If you publish it and print it, it can go on and can stay, it can remain forever, has the potential to remain forever. But you could also rip it up if it's just something that you know, that you wrote. You can put it into the fire and you can burn it. But engraving, you can't change that unless you unengrave it, unless you destroy it. You have to work very hard on that. So I tell the kids who come and ask about, not my kids, God forbid, but kids who are very wild and want to put a tattoo inside of them. Mm-hmm. And, you know, they are looking to me to convince them not to do it. And I don't have a real reason. They used to tell them that you're not going to be buried in a Jewish cemetery, but that's just not true. I can't tell a lie. So what I say is, the Torah forbids a tattoo. It is 100% forbidden. They don't really care about the Torah. You know, they don't keep Shabbos, they don't keep this, and so why should they worry about tattoos? And they want to have a tattoo. They want to show off their tattoo. So I say, I want you to take this from me. I know I might sound like your father now, but just take it, accept it from me. When between the age of 18 and 19 to the age of 21, 22, a lot of things change in your life. That's if you're mature. If you're not mature, it takes you to being about 24, 25. And this is one thing that you will not be able to regret. Because once it's engraved inside of you, you're going to have to go through a lot of pain and perhaps an eternal scar on you. And you don't want at the age of 25 to live with your body for the rest of your life with something that you regret. And therefore, before you make a decision like this, you have to really think. I said, just like you won't get married at 18 these days, they don't get married at 18. These kids won't get married at 18. Kids who want tattoos won't get married at 18 because they understand that it's premature to do that, and if they did it, they may get into trouble later on because they hear all these stories. Well, it's exactly the same thing with a tattoo. So I was talking with this kid who said that she wants to put a tattoo of a holy tattoo. And I pushed and I pushed and I pushed, and finally she told me, Shema Yisrael. I said, I will give you a siddur. You'll have Shema Yisrael 400 times in your siddur. I'll give you a chumash. You'll have it in front of you. Just wait a few years. She says, Rabbi, I'm not asking you if I can put the tattoo. I'm doing it. I want to put it in a place where it's a hidden place. I spent 2 hours with this girl. She is as wild today as she was then. And I did not manage to, I probably didn't dig deep enough into my heart. We're still in touch we're about all kinds of different things, but and I think of her every once in a while, and all of a sudden she starts sending me emails and stuff. We do have a connection, and she's dating a Jewish guy. Very seriously. Thank God for that. Anyway, but the bottom line is that sometimes you engrave something. I asked her recently. I said, "Do you remember the discussion I had?" She says, "Very well." I said, "Do you regret it yet?" She said, "Nope." I said, will your future husband regret it? She says, well, he's going to have to live with it. I said, or not. So, you don't know. And I said, the one thing about hidden places is, it's like the guy who had a hole-in-one on Yom Kippur. You know, the guy went to the golf course and he had a hole-in-one on Yom Kippur. Then he said, who am I going to tell? I didn't show up in Shul, I went to the golf course. On Yom Kippur? So I said, well, one thing about a hidden thing, you can't even show it off. When you engrave something, it can be potentially forever. And you better be careful and make sure that this is what you want. So you can't change your mind per se. I mean, there's always a way out. I mean, you can dig it out. You can burn it out. I mean, people do that. People dumbly engrave names of loved ones in their arms and in wherever. And then, life takes its course. I just read an article recently in the Sunday paper about tattoos. How many more people are getting tattoos removed now than they are getting engraved? It's a big business today. Because people sort of are growing up or whatever. They realize how, this is my personal opinion, how ugly it makes a person look. That's my personal opinion. There are ways to make things beautiful. I said, put a temporary tattoo on, just to. Anyway, I've had my run-ins and battles over the years. Anyway, so the bottom line is when you engrave something, though, it stays, it remains forever. Certainly until one has to gouge it out or destroy it. That's the second world. There is a real entity here now. It's not just a thought or a note. This is, it's here. It's here to stay. It's engraved. Not like a temporary, like a sukkah that's here for a few days and it goes. All right. On the other hand, there is an advantage to an engraving in that it is part of the substance in which it is engraved. When you write something, like when you write a Sefer Torah, for example, you are putting ink on a piece of parchment. Or when you print ink on a piece of paper. When you write, you are imprinting ink of the pen onto your paper. So you are now connecting two things, two separate entities, and you're putting them together. There's always the potential, though, to erase what you've done. In the Sefer Torah, you can take a razor blade and just chop off the letters, and they come off. And with a piece of paper or with ink, if you have the right chemicals, you could remove it. Because it's not really on. It's just imprinted on, but it's not part of it. Whereas when you engrave something, the engraving is part of the substance. It's part of the material in which you wrote. It is a part of the substance in which it is engraved. It is not an added substance. It is part of it. If you think about a ring that has something engraved on it, or a necklace, that engraving is actually a part of the necklace. It is a part of the ring. Therefore, what is being revealed is the engraved object itself. It's not the writing that is being revealed. It is the object. And in the object, it happens to be engraved within the object. Thus, letters that are engraved in fine stone, although they are letters, which therefore make them different than the rest of the stone, they actually reveal the stone, because it's part of the stone. Not so in the case of letters of ink written on parchment, where the revelation takes place through the letters that cover the parchment. The black covers the white of the parchment, whereas engraving, it doesn't cover anything, it is part of the thing. The stone reveals the words, and the parchment doesn't reveal the words. The ink reveals the words on the parchment by covering the white space of the parchment. But in the case of an engraving, even the revelation consists of the stone itself. When you engrave something, it is part of the thing. Yes, you have to chisel out some of it, but what is remaining now, it turns around the entire meaning of that stone. And you can mean a little gemstone, it could be a big stone, and it could be a necklace, a piece of gold. When you engrave something, it becomes part of it. This is a metaphor for the world, for the Metziut of the world of Berea. Although it is the first yesh, yesh means a something, an entity. Yesh means there is something here. So although it is the first yesh that can receive shape, which means therefore that it is on a lower level than what is before, that it's not a non-entity or whatever, the note, the fleeting note. So therefore it is a lower level. So although it is on a lower level, which means it's a yesh, it's a world that can be shaped into something. Nevertheless, it is not a true yesh and metzius. It's not a true thing. It is the first substance whose revelation consists of the revelation of the thing itself. That means it's like a stone, that when you look at the stone, you see the stone. And the letters are part of the stone. So it's not a separate entity, it is the stone. Whereas a Sefer Torah, a handwritten note, a printed book, those two are separate entities. The ink is covering it. So there, it's a real entity. Here, it's not quite a real entity because it's sort of engraved in it. It can take a shape of letters, but it is part of it, not really something extra, not a new entity. It's just part of it. And although it is no longer the same Metziut as in Atzilut, the previous world, as we mentioned before, at great length, the godliness in it makes it very remote, very esoteric, very removed, if you will, neither is it a revealed Metziut. Rather, its Metziut consists of the fact that it has the capacity to be formed. So once you have the ability to form something, to make something, not necessarily is that a true entity. Because if you turn it into some letter, then it turns into a different entity. So if you engrave the entity, if you engrave words into this entity, now it's not anymore stone, it is telling you something. But it is that thing that's telling you something. It is in and of itself a revelation of itself. Now the rock is saying something else. What he's trying to say here is basically that we call it a creation, And it's the first yesh, it's the first real, something that can be felt, that it's real. So we call it that. We refer to it as that, but yet it is still very spiritual, very remote. Don't think for a second that the world of Bria is just somewhere, you know, where you could reach. What? I thought it was Ben Hananya playing around. Isn't there a show today? Yeah, I guess right now. Well, we're getting it. It's a sukkah. Oh, it's this Friday?
No, it was.
Oh, it
Friday,
was?
Saturday, and Sunday.
So they're just turning around on time.
Which means we are not finished with that entity. So I guess what he's trying to say is, trying to help us understand here, that with all the metaphors that he used with engraving and all that, don't think that this is a physical, somewhere that, you know, this is a very spiritual, high world, and it is the world where the angels sort of begin there. This is where the common angels, not the big archangels, the main ones, but the other angels that are created through activities that we do. Every time we say something good, and every time we do a mitzvah in this world, another angel is created, or more than one. And every time we do something that we shouldn't do, different types of entities are created. And depending on what we do and and on the whole picture, that's where the question is, what kind of angel is being created. If you recall, I told a story about the angels that were created. Anybody remember? I know I spoke a lot over the last couple of weeks. A hint about the angels that were created. The guy did an act, it was on Yizkor, on Yom Kippur. Well, I guess it better
all
be...
the angels were flying around.
I'm sorry?
All the angels were flying around because they're so high.
I said that about the Kedusha. Right. But that wasn't the story that I told. That did say that. You're right. Hey, 1 point for you. 10 points for you. But the story that I told at the Yizkor, I guess that on this Thursday when we do Yizkor again, for the last time for 6 months, I better tell a better story and a better message that people will remember at least for a couple of weeks.
Repeat it because it's worth repeating.
The story was about the guy who came up to heaven, and he hadn't been the best kind of guy. This was the argument that he was a butcher.
Oh yeah. That'd be great.
I didn't hear it like you right now.
I can't do justice to it by just saying it in 1 minute. But as a reminder to those who did hear it, and I'll tell it to you, privately. But there was a guy who they wouldn't let him into heaven because he was summoning this sheikhet, the slaughterer, to the. I know Susan would have remembered the story because she took this very personal. And I didn't know any of this, but her father was a butcher. But the butcher died, and he summoned this slaughterer, the guy who slaughtered for him, the sheikhet. He summoned him to heaven because of him he couldn't get into heaven, and he ended up being on this earth. The court case happened on this earth, and the guy said that the slaughterer didn't deliberately trafed the animals. It's a very fine line. You've got an animal to be slaughtered properly the cut must be so fine and so precise, and the knife cannot have even a little nick. Any mess with that, and the animal is not considered good. And he kept on doing things that would make the animals or the birds no good, and it cost him an arm and a leg, and he ended up dying from his debts and his troubles, and that sat on his heart. And so they came to a resolution. And in the meantime, the rabbi asked the soul, "You didn't have the finest reputation from your youth. There were rumors about you. So how did they let you in there, to heaven like that?" And so he said that when he was younger, he used to be a wagon driver before he became a butcher. And he was driving a group of rabbis. And they were attacked by a band of robbers. And the robbers wanted to inflict lots of damage and steal from them to these rabbis. Some of them were older people, and who knows what could have happened. So he went out and fought them all, and delivered blow after blow after blow, and he saved these rabbis. And when he came to heaven, they said, "You're a no goodnik. You got a checkered past, and you can't come into this nice place." And all these rabbis came out of heaven, and they said, not only did he save us, but he allowed us, because he saved us, years and years of all of the blessings that we made, and the prayers that we did, and the study that we did. It's all thanks to him. So now let's pile up all of that on the scale, and that weigh down any bad stuff, and then he was allowed into the better place. And the point was that one good act, that's all he did, one thing in his life, saved on one occasion, and the man lived to however long he lived, that one thing let him in, because he created all kinds of positive energy from the result of this one act. Now, could you imagine if you do more than one act? And so my point was, remember the act. If some people have a problem with sometimes people mention about their parents and they didn't get along, and it wasn't a good relationship, and don't tell me about my parents, because remind yourselves of the one act that would define them as in the positive. You just never know how that one act could have affected them, impacted them in that other world. And furthermore, the one act that we would do down on this world, on their behalf, for them, you never know how far-reaching that could be as well. Remember my sermon?
Yes.
That's the sermon again. That was the point of that sermon. I have to come up with a new material now. Thank you. I couldn't tell that story again.
So if you do a good deed or mitzvah here, and you dedicate it to the merit of a deceased relative, it goes to their credit, and then
That's precisely what I said. That is
precisely
precisely what I said by looking in the words of the Yizkor, which says, as a result of my pledge to tzedakah, then may God remember in favor my father, my mother, whatever. That's what the words say. So it's that we do a physical act on this world, and it can have a lifelong impact on our loved ones in the other world, because we can't measure. That's what I'm trying to say is we can't measure acts in the spiritual world. To us, what did this guy do? All right, so what did you do for me lately? You did one thing and you saved this. Well, okay, I hear, good. And what else did you do? What else didn't you do? And we have no answer for that on this world, because we're very limited here. We don't see past. But if we had the ability to see in the sources of what is going on here, then there's a different picture here. So that's why each act, even if it's one single act, can be a world. And how much more so if one does 2 acts, or 10 acts, or 200, or 2,000, 2 million acts. There is a question in Judaism. I want to give a donation of, okay, now I'm thinking big, of $1 million to Chabad, all right, okay, I'll go down. $500,000. No, good. Okay, I want to give a donation of $1 million. That's right. Win the lottery, I want to give it to Chabad. Good. It's free money. Let me do something good. So should I give the whole $1 million at once? Yes. Or should I or should I divide it? If I'm unable to give $1 million, I'm only able to give $1 million for the year. Should I give out the pledge once a week, give whatever it is, the amount, or once a month give it, or once a day? Or should I give it out? Just here, take the money. And the answer is better, give it out, pay it out, because you should do it every day. Then it becomes a different act. Now, the pledge is one pledge, so that paying out doesn't help. But if you didn't pledge it, if you just said, okay, I'm doing it, but I want to do it this way so I can give my tzedakah every day, then it's something. That's why we put a few pennies into tzedakah every day. Put a quarter, put a nickel, put a dime, put a dollar, but put something in the tzedakah every single day, in addition to what your monthly donation or pledges, just that you should have that act. The hand puts money into tzedakah. It's an act. Taking the lulav and you're shaking the branches. Oh, what am I doing now? You don't know what you're doing. I don't know what you're doing. We don't know what we're doing. But these are acts that could pierce, open up a door, pierce the heavens. We don't know what it is. That's what I'm saying. The effect of the act, we have no idea. In Pirkei Avot, in the Ethics of Our Fathers, it says, it is preferred and it is more beautiful, one moment of teshuvah, of repentance and good deeds in this world than anything you can do in the other world, because there is no doing in the other world. At the same time, it says it's the one moment of pleasure, which is of course spiritual pleasure, in the other world is better than all the pleasures in the world can possibly happen for 120 years on this one. Because we think pleasure is good food and a good vacation and good weather and whatever. But in reality, which is in the spiritual world, that's irrelevant. I've mentioned this story before, at least twice. But it's good to say again about the guy who prayed and prayed and prayed and prayed. He worked very, very hard for his money. And he wanted to take it with him. And so he prayed and prayed, and finally an angel appeared to him at night and said, "What do you want?" He says, "I've spent my life accumulating this money, and I feel like it's unfair. I do want to take it with me." And so the angel says, "I'll get back to you." And the angel came back to him a few nights later, whatever it was, and said to him, "Listen, it's a strange request. We've never done it before. But you've been a very good guy. You've been very decent. You've been honest. You've given from yourself. We're going to make an exception. You can take it with you." And so he says, he woke up with such excitement. And he took, as he got older and he realized that his time was coming near, he took all of his money and transferred it into gold bricks. And he instructed the burial society to bury the bricks with him. He says, I got this note from heaven. I'm in. Very strange, but they did it. He gets buried, and they bury the bricks with him. Anyway, he comes to the pearly gates, or whatever kind of gates they are, whatever there is up there. And he's carrying his bag with and the angel says to him, "What's in there?" He says, "What do you mean? I have permission. This is my money that I brought with me from the other world." The angel says, "You can't come in with that." He says, "I have the paper. I have it written and sealed." He shows him the paper. He reads it. Says, "You're right." He says, "This is the signature. It's true." I just have one question for you. There was so much to do on that other world. That's when you came with this? What are you going to do with this here? Where's your mitzvah? Where's your tefillin? Where's your tzitzis? If you wanted to bring those objects, like Shabbos candles, you wanted to bring the tzedakah box, you wanted to bring that with you, I get it. But what's this? What can you do with this here? If you wanted to bring a prop of what goes on in the other world, I hear. But this? What's this? No, this is useless. It's a waste of time. Now, if you brought a few gold bars over here, I would put it to good use. It wouldn't be useless at all. But we don't have the perception and what goes on in that other world. So we don't know what acts are. We don't know what outcomes are. We don't know what impacts we have, even with one act. And I'll conclude this somewhat of a diversion with the following from Rabbi Levi Yitzchak, and I mentioned him a couple of times on the first night of Sukkot. Remember that story? The guy who was banned from the sukkah.
Yes.
I remember that. If you were here Wednesday night, I told a very shocking story. People's faces. I just told what they were feeling at that point. What? The people were looking at me in horror. All right, I see most of you weren't here Wednesday night. Where were you? All right. I can't tell that story in 1 minute. That story is too good. It's too dramatic. I'll have to tell the story. I'll have to tell the story a different time. But the bottom line is that this same Rabbi Levi Yitzchak, he always was looking to find the positive, the good in everyone and every single person that he saw and everything that he. I told the story of him smoking. There was another story. It was on Tisha B'Av, saddest day of the year, and everybody knows. It's certainly in that little town, which is still a little town called Berdichev. And he saw somebody walking with a piece of bread in his hand, and he was eating on this big fast. And he stopped him. He says, "You might have forgotten that it's Tisha B'Av today." And he said, "No, I know it's Tisha B'Av." He said, "Then you might have forgotten that you're not allowed to eat on Tisha B'Av." He says, "No, I know you're not allowed to eat on Tisha B'Av," as he takes another bite from his bread. He says, "Well, then maybe you're not feeling well. And if somebody is not well, if they're sick, and there may be a life or death issue, you're allowed to eat." He says, "No, I'm very healthy." So the rabbi saw who he was dealing with. So he looked up to heaven. He says, "Ribono shel olam, Master of the universe, look at your people. They can't even lie." He was looking for something positive, and he always managed to find what's positive, even with a thug like that, who would, like, in front of the rabbi, have a little respect, put your bread behind you, none of that. So this rabbi once said that God writes in the Torah, if you follow the Torah and you do everything, it's going to be blessing, and there's going to be life, and there's going to be this. God writes in the Torah, he puts in the book all the wonderful blessings. But he puts into our hearts all the opposite of that. What we want to do is not what's in the Torah necessarily. That's why the Torah is warning us. He said, what's the big deal? You put the promises you put in the Torah, the good stuff you put in the Torah, and the bad stuff you put into us. Why don't you do the opposite? Put the good stuff in our heart, put the bad stuff in there, the inclination to do no good, put it in there. That was him, the rabbi. So the bottom line is, what goes on in heaven, we don't have. It's all in the books. You have to believe it. The actions that we take, that we do, are in spite of all the inclinations to go whichever way we think we're going, and whichever way we think is the best way to go. Bottom line is, when we do good, positive, spiritual, and physical things that have spiritual impacts, we go a long way, and no one knows what kind of impacts. And back to where we started. And that's where good angels are created, depending on the act. They could be created in the highest levels. This is why he keeps on emphasizing that despite the fact that he's giving this engraving example, that means it's an entity, you can feel it, it's part of it. Nevertheless, the impact of that world is very removed, and the impact that we do in this world, if it's a big thing, and we don't know what's big and what isn't big, the bigger the act, the bigger the sacrifice, the bigger the stumbling block, the greater the impact is in the other world, and we can even reach to the ethereal worlds, as he says, in the world of Berea, where angels can be created from different actions that we take in this world. All right, we still got 2 more worlds to cover, but that's for next week. I'm afraid that we are not going to be in the sukkah next Sunday. Just in time.